You're listening to Fun Oldies, 100.9 FM and AM 1450. Welcome to the fastest hour in radio. All About Cars. Brought to you by ABC Motors Prescott with your host, David Don't Call Me Dave Spence, and Big Mike Hill.
All right, Mike, I can't believe it. We're here again for a third time. This is incredible.
One of these days they're going to change the locks, David.
I think you're about right on that one.
Good morning, Mr. Scott.
Good morning.
It's always a pleasure to be here with the best producer in the business.
You don't know a lot of producers.
He's buttering you up, I can tell.
I didn't say which business we were in. Well, it's been a long week. It's been a lot of stuff going on. Everything good with you, David?
Everything's good with me today. Very
Excellent.
good day.
Excellent. Your project's all coming along great?
Which one?
Well, I wanted to talk about the one that you've been chomping at the bit about lately, your baby project there.
Oh, you mean the combination coupe?
Exactly.
Yeah, she's doing pretty good. I've actually made a whole lot of progress. As you know, I fixed the unfixable carburetor.
Well, before you get into the whole what you've done, I think you ought to fill Scott in because he's looking a little befuddled at us like, what's a combination coupe? What does it do? Where did it come from? Why is it here? What are we discussing?
Sounds like a good idea, but most people probably don't know. We're really confusing him. Deal is this. It's a 1939 Graham, and it happens to be one of three body styles for the year. It's the second most rare body style. Most people have never seen a Graham. They usually see my sedan, and they say, oh, is this a Pontiac? No, got nothing to do with it. American-made car made by Graham Page Motors Corporation of Detroit, Michigan. Plant was actually one block into Dearborn, and believe it or not, still stands today. Kind of interesting thing. But it's a pretty wild car. Looks sort of like, I guess somebody once wrote a fugitive from a Buck Rogers cereal, maybe. The ultimate in Art Deco. And of course, I drove the sedan. It's outside this morning.
Is it? Excellent, yeah. Excellent. Maybe during the commercial we'll run out there so Scott can see what we're talking about.
Yeah, we could possibly do that. But the coupe is a whole lot more rare car. I think definitely sexier. Well, you've seen it, Mike, and I used to say it was sexier. And then when you saw it together, what'd you think?
I agree. It looks a lot sleeker and a little more aggressive, which I like.
And it's one of the first cars with sort of the beginning of a hardtop, with the chrome window frames and very little in the pillar area in the center. By the 50s, we had full hardtops being made, and nowadays we don't get to have those.
Right.
But kind of a cool thing. And so it adds a little bit to it. There were a couple other things made by like Mercury or Lincoln at the time that were just coming with that look. So it's very avant-garde for 1939.
Well, especially that front grille. That whole front grille assembly is what really, from the side view, a lot of those cars of 1939 era there, they all looked like they were stamped from the same designer. I won't say they looked alike, but they were all like the same mode.
Yeah, they're similar.
But then when you look at the front grille, that shark nose-esque type thing of the Graham, it's just really a cool looking car.
Yeah, it is. And nowadays, people really appreciate it. It was kind of an interesting thing way back in 1939. It was winning awards, won 3 different Concours d'Elegance in France, and it also was winning awards from American designers and stuff. But the car didn't sell worth a darn. Very poor seller, actually, because it's what I would call a loud car for 39. You've seen every other 39 car. Have you ever seen a car that looks that loud when you see it?
No, there's nothing subtle about that car for that era.
No. And so if you're somebody buying an upper middle range car like this, is that the car you're going to buy in the 30s? You're talking to the end of the Depression, and it's still literally the Depression is still going on. You're really going to buy that car.
Right.
It's an attempt by a company
That car just made it onto the list of 100 most collectible or
100 most collectible cars of all time from U.S. manufacturers. Yes.
So it's moved up.
Oh, yeah. Today, I've only ever had somebody say one negative thing about the way it looks. Most people think I've done body mods and stuff on the car and that I've done all this work to make it look like this. And it's like, no, this is all as stock as you can get.
I've got a newspaper to prove it.
Yeah. And so, it's a hell of a deal.
Now, you said there's 3 models. There's the sedan.
Yep.
And then there's
the combination
coupe. Now, what makes it combination coupe?
It's because it's close coupled. What the factory really did to make the combination coupe is from the roof stamping huge stamping, about a $50,000 die in 1939. That's a tremendous amount of money. So what they did is they chopped the roof in half, brought it together several inches, it's about 8 inches together, re-welded it, and then they lead that over the top for the seam. Now this gives you a closer passenger cabin, so it's got a much larger trunk than normal, and new rear corners and new doors, of course, to make the car basically out of the base sedan without having to use so much tooling.
Okay.
And yet the car looks mega cool and like it's very different, but it's really large and made out of the sand.
Now, is it 4-door or 2-door?
It's 2-door.
Okay, so the combination coupe is 2-door. The sedan, of course, is 4-door.
Yeah.
And then what's the third model?
The third model is the model that's super rare, and Mike has seen the one I've got, but I've got the only one in the world of a 2-door sedan that's in good enough shape to even restore. And
I'm glad you qualified that, because I was going to say, I've got one too.
I know you do. Right down there at ABC Motors, that one looks like a pile.
Well, it does. It does. But there's some it's amazing. You saw it in the backyard. There's got the one on the trailer still, that rusted thing.
Oh, right.
What's amazing about that is that some of the components are still in perfect shape. I mean, like perfect shape, compared to the fact that there's the main sheet metal has been so rusted and abused from back east that you can tear it with your hands like paper.
Yeah,
And
it's definitely got tin worm.
And the other stuff has stayed perfect.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's what the reason for getting the car was because there were things that were worth having that are so darn unique, you needed that car for that purpose. And that's the only reason I would have got it. Remember I told you the story on that is I didn't want the car.
Right.
I wanted the parts, but the guy didn't want to sell the parts. I had to take the car.
Well, that's because he thought he had a very rare Studebaker.
Yeah, that's about right.
Or was it Packard? What did he? I know he thought it was one of them.
And it's like, well, no, it's a nothing when you think about it that way. But from a standpoint of the rare parts, it was worth getting.
Right.
But as you've seen mine's at least together. It was a really bad hot rod. And before anybody says I said something horrible about hot rods, no, not really. It's just that, when you've seen a lot of hot rods, they might look good, but they don't drive at all. They're terrible. And that one, when it was together as a hot rod, the back end wants to be the front, and the front wants to be the back. The geometry is all wrong in how the builder set it up.
There are some hot rods that look amazing, drive amazing, and are very, very well done around town. And then there are others like yours that were hacked together. And it goes back to what we've discussed 100 times. Know what you're working on. Know what you have. And if you don't know, go find out and find somebody like us. Go to our Facebook page and ask us, what is this car? What's the problem with this? Because just cutting the springs or moving the axle or throwing a V8 in without doing anything, it changes everything. The weight dispersion, everything.
Oh, yeah. And people think it's so simple to do this. And it's not that you can't do it. There are lots of people in the business, and there are lots of people knowledgeable in this town. But you can't just figure that you know more than 200 engineers at some company. It's just not quite that simple.
Not usually.
And
There is
come
the
up with that
exception.
idea.
There is the exception, such as your carburetor fiasco.
Yeah. that's
200
true.
engineers managed to make that thing a piece of garbage. And through our discussions, your research, and painstaking experimentation, you've now got this anomaly carb that nobody can make work. The number one repair tip for this carburetor, Scott, is get rid of it and go to this other carburetor.
That's exactly true. That's what's written about it. It's like just give up, don't even try. It's not even worth it.
Every tech tip you look at from
So
back
it's just like
from back then.
just a simple single or two barrel.
It's a single barrel carburetor, so you'd think, oh, this is going to be simple.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not. For mine, it had three major problems I had to figure out. I think one of the worst problems that Marvel Chevrolet has, and what people make for a joke about them is they're a marvel if they work because they're that bad to work on, is it's got a cast iron body to it, but then its accelerator pump housing is a zinc die casting. Well, the zinc die casting over time relative to the actual housing of the carburetor doesn't mate up, so it leaks. And this isn't apparent that it leaks, but I figured out the damn thing leaks. And it will leak around the hole where it mates up, which goes to the accelerator pump. So you're thinking the accelerator pump's working right, you pump it, and there it squirts nicely in the carburetor. Everything's beautiful. So you go to start up the darn thing, runs great for about 5 minutes, and then it continues to leak so bad that the car won't run at all, and you're going, what the hell's going on? And I ended up spending about 40 hours literal work time learning the carburetor so well. You cannot look it up. You will not find sufficient information on that carburetor anywhere to tell you how the hell to put it back together.
Well, I actually, if you remember, you and I discussed it, and I looked it up, and I found a guy that said, I have the absolute end-all, be-all answers for this carburetor. So I clicked on his page. It shows a list of replacement carburetors.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
That's how you fix them.
So I figured out how to fix the leak. Then besides figuring out how to fix the leak, I figured out how to make a float. And sometime on the radio here, I should explain how you make a float for a carburetor. Literally, when you don't have one, it will work for any carburetor. Easy thing to do.
Now, the quick test.
Nice.
Scott, do you know what a float is in the carburetor?
I do know what the float is.
Excellent. For our listeners, David, you want to tell them real quick what the float is in case they don't understand offhand?
Well, a float in the carburetor allows there to be a certain level of gasoline, and it controls a needle valve that allows the gasoline to flow in from the fuel pump. If the float comes up, shuts off the needle valve, stops the flow. If we don't do that, the carburetor is just going to overflow. So it provides for fuel in the bowl in the carburetor.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great explanation, and that carburetor's been a nightmare for you, and I have to congratulate you on actually getting that thing to run smooth, and it idles, it revs, it doesn't cough, sputter, nothing. I'm actually really, really impressed because, like we said, nobody else has one, and it's actually a pretty cool feat, and I think people are going to clamor to it at the Graham Show.
I think so, Mr. Mike. Thank you.
All right, well, let's get to our sponsors here, and we'll be back after some messages here on 100.9 and 1450 AM. You're listening to All About Cars.
We're gonna head for the driving on the edge of town. We're gonna look real cool as we tool around. All the fellas gonna scream and shout. When I leave, I'm gonna be alone out.